What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Getting toward the end of the week. Man, it's a little trying. I was hoping it would be a bit of a vacation, but I got to teach a summer course. So I am grinding, making sure everything is ready for that. What's up, Brandon? Good to see you in here, man. Hope all you guys are well, really. Just getting back from checking out Jurassic World with my son. So I might do, and you guys let me know if you want me to do a short review of it, because there are a few things to be pointed out. But let me know if you're up for that, and I'll do it. What's up, hey Rue? Good to see you. All right. So and before we jump in, just a reminder: support the Institute for Black Male Studies. I'll put the link in the description box. You can also go ahead and pick up some merchandise. We got some new shirts in Black Men Matter. We got our, Frederick Douglass shirts, our Tommy Curry shirts. We got the I Am a Black Masculinist shirts. So yeah, check out the apparel, and you can walk away with some cool gear that you're not going to get anywhere else, and also be able to celebrate having made a donation. What's up, no one? What's up, Mel? Good to see y'all in here. Yeah. So like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel so we can continue to produce the content that you really aren't going to get anywhere else. Y'all know what it is. Appreciate that, Brandon. And paying for the most valuable information in the world. Much appreciated, man. Much appreciated. Thank you. So let's deal with a little bit of this. I ran across an article, and it kind of caught me off guard in a couple different ways that we'll get into. But it's one you can find on the MSN piece. And like usual, again, I'll put in the description all the links for what I'm going to go through. So you can look into it yourself, see if there's anything you disagree with me about or anything else you wanted to delve into. Shout out to Winston. What's going on? What's up, Victor? So this piece is entitled, let's see, Black Americans Bear the Brunt of Fentanyl Epidemic in Washington. Right. This is on MSN.com, and this is dated yesterday, so it's brand new off the presses. And it starts out, right here. Lorando Duncan wears long sleeve shirts because his arms bear scars he doesn't like to show. Those are the drugs he's been injecting into his veins for decades. See him there, 65 years old with a cane. Is born in the U.S. capital, Washington, 65 years ago. The slender African American has been using heroin almost all his adult life. But the advent of fentanyl, an ultra-powerful and addictive synthetic opioid, changed everything. Fentanyl killed a lot of my friends, he tells AFP beneath a picture of America's first black president, black vice president, Kamala Harris, that he has hung in his apartment in Anacostia. I may have mispronounced that. I'm not familiar with it. One of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. Right. See his arms. Almost every 2 weeks, I hear about somebody overdosing on fentanyl, and that's real. We've been hearing about that more and more. And, it's scary. Shout out to Ibuki. I know this is something you could comment on in your line of work. I'm sure you've seen a little bit of this, so feel free to share what you know. But trying to deal with a little bit of this. So it says, he fears he'll be next. I need to stop because eventually I'm going to kill myself, and I know it. Fentanyl, sold in powder form and cheap to manufacture, so often used as an additive in other drugs such as heroin, began flooding the market in 2014. Right. Let me see here. In 2021, 426 people died of opioid overdoses in Washington, 5 times as many as in 2014. Of them, 95% were fentanyl related and 85% were black folk. Like Lorando, the majority were between 50 and 69 years old. Right. Heroin users have been at the forefront of this poisoning of supply, as experts call it. One day, I bought some drug from a guy I know, but I didn't know it was fentanyl, says Lorando, a former prisoner now living on disability benefits. He passed out, he says, falling on his hip. Now he walks with a cane. Right? When I fell, it was day. When I woke up, it was nighttime. God woke me up this day, right? He says. But now he takes fentanyl up to 3 times a day to feel normal and avoid the illness and nausea of withdrawal. Now they use fentanyl to cut heroin, so you're basically going to get fentanyl in everything you buy. Everybody uses fentanyl to cut the dope, make it potent, he says. Let's see. Yeah, what's up, Keo? Good to see you in here. You can see the needles, syringes used for drug injections collected by the Family and Medical Counseling Service on April 21st. The problem, he says, or he adds, is that users never know what they're going to get. You're playing Russian roulette, building trust. In Washington, long dubbed Chocolate City, because of its large African American population, Black people were already dying from overdoses at twice the rate of white people in 2010, according to one study. By 2019, it was 10 times more. For both periods, this disparity was higher than in any state in the country. Experts say one reason is because of how much more vulnerable Black people are. Low income, less likely to own a home, less likely to have access to resources that can keep them stable and supported. A few grassroots organizations are doing their best to combat the ravages of the drugs. Tyrone Pinckney has been working for one of them, the Family and Medical Counseling Service, for 10 years. The 33-year-old travels around the city, especially what he describes as the crime areas, in a recreational vehicle. Some information there on synthetic opioids. On the RV's floor is a box containing dirty syringes collected from visitors who are then given clean ones. And on the seats are cartons of Narcan, the brand name of naloxone. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that one. An antidote capable of blocking the effects of opioids and thus saving a person in the process of overdosing. With a tablet in hand, Pinckney questions the few dozen people who turn up each day, checking for example, whether they've been tested for the AIDS virus. It's not going to keep them from doing what they're doing, but it'll keep them safe. Little by little, bonds of trust are created. On his phone, he scrolls through the names of dozens of clients, as he calls them, who can call him in case of need. Right. Shout out to Artisan. What's going on with you, man? Good to see you. Hope all is well. Shout out to Officer Faulkner. You know what it is. You know, Ibuki says that's not cutting, that's augmenting the potency of the illicit drug. Okay. All right. The association helped more than 2,500 people in 2021 and distributed more than 200,000 syringes, according to the regional coordinator, Mark Robinson. It's an emergency. It's an epidemic. It's an opioid epidemic layered beneath a COVID pandemic, layered beneath a health emergency that was already pre-existing amongst Black and brown people, he continues, listing the ways in which Washington's residents are made vulnerable. You have multiple epidemics upgrading simultaneously. It's like a perfect storm, and we're right in the midst of it. And it's no accident, right, that it's clear we can see Black folk in the midst of it as well. But we'll get to the crux of what I'm talking about, what I'm interested in a moment. What's up, Hybrid? Good to see you, man. Let's see. Yeah, multiple epidemics upgrading. Let me see. For many, the steps needed to access treatments such as opioid substitutes, methadone, and buprenorphine remain too complex, making it often easier to get drugs than help. We've really worked hard on access, says Barbara Bezron, who heads Washington Department of Behavioral Health. For example, users no longer need to go through a dispatch center to receive prescriptions. 70 approved entities can directly receive new patients. More than 5,000 people are currently enrolled in these care programs. The city has also prioritized the fee distribution of naloxone, giving away 56,000 kits in 2021. Right, so this is heavy. And you can see that they're kind of using pictures of Black men at key points, one of whom is trying to help people, one of whom is dealing with the throes of this. But what I was drawn to is this title, right? Black Americans bear the brunt of fentanyl epidemic in Washington. And one of the things that got me about this is, you guys know that I talk about flat blackness, right? For those who are my most consistent listeners. And flat blackness, as I say, is a concept that I pulled from the ADOS movement. Right now, Yvette and Tone, when they talk about flat blackness, they're talking about the ways in which you got immigrant Black folk, and you got what we used to call African American Black folk, and all of this has been flattened in a particular way when certain things are discussed. And so you don't know whose lineage is actually being brought to bear in some of these issues. But when I talk about flat blackness, the focus of it for me is along gender lines. And one of the things I talk about are the ways in which groups like, for example, BLM would take issues that were impacting, as they called it, the Black community, and they would kind of wash over the gender differences. They would make it a Black issue, and then they would bait and switch the conversation by focusing on women and LGBT and downplaying the experiences of men. And I use the example often. I've been using it for some years. It's kind of like if you took breast cancer and you said, you know what, Breast cancer is a serious issue in the community. It needs to be dealt with. All your pictures of that are of Black men who've survived breast cancer. And then, of course, you're going to talk about the needs that Black men have for surviving breast cancer, and make a donation so we can help Black men, even though Black men suffer from breast cancer at about 2%. The majority of cases are Black women. And we would never introduce breast cancer as a Black male issue, because we know, even though it affects some Black men, it is overwhelmingly an issue that affects Black women. So to say that this is a Black issue, you can say it. Technically, it is. Ain't nobody going to eat your lunch for that. But truth be told, it's a bit disingenuous. It's a Black women's issue more than anything. And it's an issue that affects families in terms of, Black women that we lose, but overwhelmingly, this is something Black women suffer from. But when it's issues that pertain to men, we're told that Black men are being somewhat oppressive, or they're privileged in the fact that, their deaths or whatever grant more attention, even though a lot of that has to do with the fact that they die on camera, but that's a whole nother subject. But no, we don't want to pay any acknowledgement to the issues that Black men actually do suffer more from and need to be singled out. We treat being singled out when it comes to Black men as something inherently oppressive, sexist, or misogynist. But when it's something that Black women are singled out for, all of a sudden it's great, it's a contribution, it's uplifting, so on and so forth. But to me, and to those of us who are in the, that study Black male studies, to us, it's about the empirical data. What does the data show? And if the data shows that Black men are in a vulnerable position on a given issue, then it shouldn't be a problem to focus on Black men. And why am I talking about that in relation to fentanyl? Well, this is an article that came out on pewresearch.org this year, January 19th. Recent surge in U.S. drug overdose deaths has hit Black men the hardest. Nearly 92,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 2020, marking a 30% increase from the year before, a 75% increase over 5 years, and by far the highest annual total on record, according to the CDC. Preliminary figures suggest that 2021 death toll from overdoses may be even higher, right? While overdose death rates have increased in every major demographic group in recent years, no group has seen a bigger increase than Black men. As a result, Black men have overtaken white men and are now on par with American Indian or Alaska Native men as the demographic groups most likely to die from overdoses. Right? Now, this chart is key. Drug overdose death rate among Black men in the U.S. more than tripled between 2015 and 2020. U.S. drug overdose death rates per 100,000. Right? Now, this is not limited to fentanyl by any means. But considering the rates that we're looking at and the current crisis tied to fentanyl, it's safe to say there's likely some serious overlap. And it begs the question why a lot of this data isn't disaggregated for race and gender, right? You usually find it either race or gender. We need it disaggregated by race and gender so we can actually look at who's suffering from what. And that in turn should help us create solutions that are better tied in to what people are going through, so we know who to target and why, right? Let me see here. All right. Okay, yeah, just wanted to check something. All right, so as you can see in the chart here, right, you got men and women, and it's broken up by race and gender, and this is what I'm talking about. Charts like these are extremely useful. This is Pew Research Center data, that allow us to kind of see what's going on. So we'll start a bit, counterintuitively. Let's start with the women on the right. You can see them broken up by race. So at the bottom, you have Asian or Pacific Islander, you have Hispanic and brown, you have Black and blue, and then you have gray and Native American, and of course, in that weird little yellow, you have white. Right. So here you can see amongst women, it's American Indian or Alaska Native that suffer from drug overdose to the highest degree. Black women at about third in that list, of a range between 7.7 in 2015 and 18.8 in 2020. Let's look at the men. Well, as we find on many different charts, many different issues, Black men find themselves either at the highest or lowest point, and in this instance, the highest, right? So starting from the bottom, again in green, you got your Asian or Pacific Islander. Brown is Hispanic. Black starts off in the middle and then shoots up by 2020 to the number one spot. There you got American Indian or Alaska Native, and of course, white and yellow at the top spot in 2015. But within 5 years, it shoots up dramatically, most particularly for, Black, Indian, and white men, or American Indian, excuse me. But I'm mostly interested here in Black men. As you know, I'm a Black male advocate. My research is in Black male studies. My focus is Black males. And the goal of this show is to uplift Black men and boys using critical analysis. And that's what we're doing today. We're actually looking at the ways that these overdoses are tied to Black male death. And so when you have articles that talk about Black Americans, it doesn't give you this picture. It doesn't give you this picture. And this is what's important, right? This is key. Black men are dying at almost 3 times the rate that Black women are. And some might ask, well, why are you comparing them to Black women? Well, because if it's a Black issue, then you would think that the issue would be on equal terms for men and women, and it would thus be something that Black men and women are dealing with. Now, we can say, that more people are dying than should, and we can say that about all of these deaths. But truth be told, if Black men are dying at damn near 3 times the rate of Black women, is it just a Black issue? When does it become a Black male issue? When is it okay to talk about Black males suffering from something and requiring a gender and race specific response rather than a generic, rising tide lifts all boats bullshit response that doesn't work anyway? At some point, we have to be able to identify what solutions need to go and what resources toward those solutions, need to be identified and where they need to be put. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about, drug overdosing, whether we're talking about fentanyl or other drugs or a mixture of all of them, we find that Black men need the most help. And what I find disingenuous too is even when some of my scholars, some of my colleagues will talk about this, they'll kind of generically wash over the specifics. Because even at a conference, you can bring this up and be identified as or at least questioned as a misogynist simply because you focused on Black males, even when you have verification, evidence that they suffer more. I've presented material like this at Black Studies conferences, focusing on what Black men experience. And the very first question I get 90% of the time when I've done so is, what about the women? And even when I point out that they are statistically not relevant to the particular discussion I'm trying to have, there's a kind of sucking of teeth that takes place. Like, right? It's considered a negative to talk about Black men in specific ways that really require focus, right? And these are some of the things we got to be able to push past. So it continues. There were 54.1 fatal drug overdoses for every 100,000 Black men in the United States. That was similar to the rate among American Indian or Alaska Native men, 52, and well above the rates among white men and Hispanic men. The overdose death rate among men was lowest among Asian and Pacific Islanders. As of 2015, Black men were considerably less likely than both white men and American Indian or Alaska Native men to die from drug overdoses. Since then, the death rate among Black men has more than tripled, rising 213%, while rates among men in every other major racial or ethnic group have increased at a slower pace. The death rate among white men, for example, rose 69% between 2015 and 2020. As has long been the case, women in the U.S. are less likely than men to die from drug overdoses, but death rates have risen sharply among women too, especially Black women. The overdose fatality rate among Black women rose 144% between 2015 and 2020, far outpacing the percentage increases among women in every other racial or ethnic group during the same period. Despite the steep rise in the overdose death rate among Black women, American Indian or Alaska Native women continue to have the highest such rate in 2020, as has been the case for most of the past 2 decades. There were 32 overdose deaths for every 100,000, and it goes from there. Right? Kind of what we covered in the chart. Fatality rates were much lower among Hispanic women, Asian Pacific Islander women, etc. The racial groups in the analysis include people of one race as well as those who are multiracial. All death rates are adjusted to account for age differences between U.S. demographic groups. For more information about the methodology, read the How We Did This box. Overdose deaths have risen sharply during the pandemic, and that's understandable why, right? While overdose deaths in the U.S. were on the rise before the outbreak of COVID in March 2020, such fatalities have accelerated during the pandemic, CDC has noted. Nationwide, the monthly number of overdose deaths had never exceeded 6,500 before March 2020. Between March and December 2020, there were more than 7,100 such deaths each month, including 9,400 in May 2020 alone. Experts have pointed to several possible reasons for the increase in overdose deaths during the outbreak, including less access to treatment and a rise in mental health problems associated with the pandemic. The opioid epidemic has also played an important role in the soaring number of overdose deaths, both during the pandemic and in the years leading up to it. 3/4 of all fatal overdoses in 2020 involved opioids, with more than 6 in 10 involving synthetic opioids, a category that includes fentanyl, a potent pain relief drug that is commonly manufactured and sold illegally. The overdose fatality rate involving synthetic opioids rose nearly six-fold between 2015 and 2020, from 3.1 to 17.88 deaths per 100,000 people. Earlier waves of opioid overdose deaths in the US involved heroin and prescription opioids, respectively. So even in this article, right, they're highlighting that fentanyl has tied into a lot of this, right? So they're making the direct connection in this piece between fentanyl and Black men, right? So we can be a little more clear that the other article, the previous one I looked at on MSN.com, is not wholly separate from this. And we have to be able to talk about that full-throatedly, without apology, not to discard anybody else, let alone Black women and girls, but to primarily point the finger where the need is needed most. And that shouldn't be a problem, right? That really shouldn't be an issue. But unfortunately, it is in too many circles, right? Death rates have also risen sharply in recent years for overdoses involving stimulants such as cocaine and methamphetamine. The fatality rate for overdoses involving cocaine nearly tripled between 2015 and 2020, from 2.1 to 6.0 deaths per 100,000 people. Fatality rate for overdoses involving methamphetamine and other psychostimulants more than quadrupled between 2015 and 2020, from 1.8 to 7.5 deaths per 100,000. These deaths have disproportionately affected racial and ethnic minority groups. Even as overdose deaths have soared, public concern about drug addiction in the U.S. has ticked down, according to Pew Research Center surveys. In early 2018, 42% of U.S. adults said drug addiction was a major problem in their community, but that percentage declined to 35% by 2021. Around 4 in 10 Black folk and Hispanics said that in a 2021 survey that drug addiction was a major problem in their community, compared to smaller shares of whites at 34% and Asians at 20%. As correction, as of late January 21st, really, an earlier version of this analysis, including a chart headline, incorrectly said that Black men were the demographic group most likely to die from drug overdoses in 2020. The fatality rate among Black men in 2020 was similar to the rate among American Indian and Alaska Native men, but it did not statistically exceed it. And yet, when we go back to the chart, you see what it is. So I just really want to kind of point out the ways in which this kind of thing gets downplayed. And I really want to highlight how aggressive we're going to have to become when it comes to addressing this kind of thing. This is why when we talk about the black male political agenda, and I will put that link in the description for you as well, the black male political agenda has given us the opportunity to identify the very specific policies that we need addressed, right? And it's entitled the 14-point black male political agenda. Until there's another point added, then the title will change with that as well. But the focus here is to make sure that we identify the policies that we think will best help Black men. And one of those things might have to be kind of geared toward the need to identify areas where Black men disproportionately suffer and unapologetically address them without being shamed for who else is not addressed, even when the need is nowhere near the same. We actually have to find another way to do this. This tactic is getting old and it's not helping people. And it's about time we call it into question. Now, as it stands right now, there's really nothing in the list that we have that covers, drug treatment. And so if anybody's interested in proposing a point of a policy possibility to the list, please make sure you include it in the comments, or you can do it in the comments right here on the blog for the 14-point black male political agenda, newblackmasculinities.wordpress.com. You can include it in the comment section there. I will see it. And of course, if you want credit for it, I will definitely add your name to it. If you want to be uncredited, you can request that and I will leave you anonymous. We've had both. We've had people who've been who wanted to be named and those who didn't. But as long as the ideas are solid, that's what we're interested in. If these are things that should happen, that's the focus of what we're doing. We're not really worried about how long it'll take or whether or not it's feasible. If it's rational and it's useful to uplifting the quality of life for Black boys and men, we want those ideas. So as it relates to fentanyl deaths, as it relates to overdoses, if there's any policy you can suggest, please make sure you do so. And if you can provide citations to help, in terms of what your idea is and how you got to it, all the better. Because we like to roll with data here. We like to use data to point the direction for our ideas. So you'll notice, even in the very first suggestion here, there are links, to other material that help you identify how the ideas we came up with were brought about and what data we're referencing to make it relevant, right? So NCSL data, so on and so forth, Pew data, CDC data, Bureau of Labor Statistics data, it doesn't matter to us. Whatever we need to make sure that our ideas are rooted in a foundation that is relevant and critical. Because ultimately, we're looking to make sure we help Black men and boys improve, right? Shout out to Winston. Good to see you in here, man. Haven't seen you in a second. Ghetto user, what's going on? Right. So anyway, I'm going to keep it short this today. Just wanted to kind of hit this real quick. And again, I'm looking forward to the comments. And I'll go through the live ones after this as well. But when I read this morning, I just thought, you know what? This is another opportunity for us to talk about the ways in which Black men are kind of brought in to talk about certain issues, but they're often not named as a demographic, and how that in and of itself can be a problem, especially when it comes to identifying the issues that we grapple with most. So that's it. I hope y'all are well. Hope y'all enjoy your evening. Holla at y'all soon. Peace.